Well, breaking news this morning, China is warning other countries from making any trade deals with the United States, as countries like Japan and South Korea have begun negotiations with the Trump administration. China's Commerce Ministry releasing a statement saying, quote, China firmly opposes any party reaching a deal at the expense of China's interests. If this happens, China will never accept it, and it will resolutely take countermeasures in a reciprocal manner. China is determined and capable of safeguarding its own rights and interests. Joining me now is Heritage Foundation Senior Fellow for China Strategy, Fox News contributor, and author of The 100-Year Marathon, Michael Pillsbury. Michael, it's great to see you again. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you, Cheryl.
So, what do you make about this? Again, these are threats. This is language that is coming from the CCP, that they're going to find a way to circumvent the United States, make deals with others, strong-arm other countries.
Well, one of the big debates among American-China experts over the last few years has been how strong are the hardliners around Xi Jinping. He's portrayed himself as a moderate and kind of a balancer with the pro-Mao kind of left-wingers on one side and then the hardliners on the other. When this kind of statement comes out, Cheryl, it's a sign to us that Xi Jinping is under pressure. He's got to say something anti-American. They already say a lot of anti-American things. That we're on the decline, that we're corrupt. There's even been a couple of Chinese books that we're going to fragment into pieces. It's kind of the equivalent of our idea of the collapse of China. They've got a theory of the collapse of America. So he's under pressure. There's some rumors coming out of Beijing that there's some sort of power struggle going on, that the sons of a couple of leaders who were reformers are now criticizing Xi Jinping on the one side, and then the other side is the hardliners could be much stronger than we thought. This is not good news for us. They did seem to soften, Cheryl, last week. They said, well, if Mr. Trump would just name a point man, one person to represent him, then they would start the talks. I somehow think that's not true. That's kind of the reformers trying to speak up. But Mr. Trump still has not named the point man who's going to be in charge of the talks. Last time, as you know, it was Bob Lighthizer at USTR, sometimes Treasury Secretary. But this is not looking like a smooth situation with the Chinese at all. It's looking the opposite. That it's I'm getting more pessimistic about the talks getting going.
Well, the South Koreans are coming this week, so there's at least those discussions underway. And we know that the Japanese have been here. But one of the things that China is doing, and this is interesting, they're now returning to Boeing MAX airplanes to the U.S. Beijing ordered their airlines not to take any deliveries of Boeing aircraft in response to the tariffs. But these two planes were already at a field in China. CCP says send them back. And then in the auto sector, Ford is stopping shipments of some of its most popular cars to China because they want to avoid the reciprocal tariffs on U.S. goods. Now, the Trump administration is moving forward with plans to put fees on Chinese ships at our ports in an attempt at breaking China's dominance on global shipping, Michael. What do you make of these latest moves?
Well, it's an escalation, Cheryl. I think President Trump was kind of trying the sweet approach, referring to Xi Jinping many times, including during the campaign, as my friend Xi Jinping. But what President Trump has had to do in the last month is keep raising the tariffs. They just won't come to the table. This all happened again in the first term, when it took a year to get the first round of talks starting. So I'm getting pessimistic. As long as we don't get a phone call from Xi Jinping or he doesn't stop these negative gestures toward us, it's just not looking good.
Interesting, Michael. Liz Peek is on set with me. She's got a question for you.
Good morning, Michael. There's an article in the Financial Times this morning about some of the big companies like Alibaba in China trying to source more material out of small factories in China. I'm hearing factories are closing all over China. Yeah. People are being laid off. That seems to me to be the big pressure point. What do you think? The Chinese consumer is historically and famously reluctant to buy or to up their purchases. But can this initiative from Alibaba and other companies actually take hold?
You're quite right. I've been watching Chinese television over the last couple of days. They are covering layoffs, factories closing, the number of containers that are not moving at all. So the Chinese Communist Party line in the last few days has been to highlight, look how much we're suffering.
Yeah.
Now, as you know, Liz, Xi Jinping has got his own power base. There's something like 500 families or so who are the owners or the beneficiaries of the state-owned enterprises. And they're the ones who are going to have to be hurt the most if there's a deal with President Trump to drop tariffs. So we've got this so-called 500 families group that it doesn't care that much about layoffs and unemployment and the container ships being stopped. So I'm afraid we're going to see more negative gestures come out of Xi Jinping as he tries to reassure his base, Liz. The Make China Great Again base is very concerned about these numbers that you're citing.
Well, and also, too, I want to pick up on that because now they're reportedly sanctioning U.S. Congress members, officials, head of NGOs for their, quote, egregious behavior on Hong Kong-related issues. And this action is coming in response to the U.S., which sanctioned 6 Chinese and Hong Kong officials last month. Hong Kong's oldest and largest pro-democracy political party, they're going to be disbanding. Beijing obviously has more control over this city. Hong Kong was kind of one of those last, I guess, entry points, if you will, that seemed to be open, and it looks like that's going to be shut as well.
Yes, the big factor at play here is the delisting comment that our Treasury Secretary made, just hypothetically, that we may have to delist Chinese stocks. You've been talking about this for many years, Liz and Cheryl. It's really the $1 trillion worth of capital that they get through the New York Stock Exchange. If we do delist them all at once, that's supposed to help Hong Kong. But I noticed recently the Hong Kong market people are talking about how this will hurt Hong Kong. They cannot absorb that much capital all at once. So this is a very effective threat that our Treasury Secretary has made, and I think we're seeing some reactions to it. Again, it's a pessimistic sign that that it has to go this far, and we still can't get China to come to the table for negotiations. Yeah,
Maria has made that point many times about the fact that you've got multiple Chinese companies that are listed on American exchanges, and she's brought that up many times. Yeah. Real quick, with regards to Iran, I do want to ask you this because this kind of goes back to that axis of evil, if you will. So Iran's foreign minister is set to visit China tomorrow, and there's nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran that just happened over the weekend. Those are supposed to continue. The foreign minister visited Russia last week, saying that Iran always closely consults with friends, Russia and China, over the nuclear issue, Michael. So these alignments, if you will, China, Iran, Russia, are they strengthening right now? Or do you think because of the Ukraine situation, Russia's going to pull back? Where are we right now, the state of play?
Iran keeps seeking promises from China that they will purchase gas and oil and other things from Iran. They'll have a stable sort of market for the next 5 years, despite the threats from Israel and America. This is for the last 10 years or so. I tried to cover this in a 100-year marathon, Cheryl. This axis of these countries getting together on an anti-American basis. It's really dangerous for us. And in terms of sanctioning, you mentioned sanctioning of American congressmen and senators over Hong Kong. The sanctions are also on Dan Sullivan of Alaska. He wants to reopen the ADAK, A-D-A-K, the island, and make it into a really powerful base for our forces, especially air forces, against China. So they're after him now. I notice the Chinese press picks out people it wants to demonize. And Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska, retired Marine Corps colonel, he's their new punching bag. So they're picking out individual congressmen and attacking them. Yes, you're right. And Iran, it seems to be a quasi-ally of China. We just don't seem to be able to split the relationship between Iran and China.
That's why these talks got so much tension over the weekend, and they haven't really produced results yet. Michael Pillsbury, it's always great to speak with you. Thank you so much for being with us. All right.
Thank you, Cheryl.
We'll be right back.
Joining me now to talk about this is former economic advisor under Donald Trump, Stephen Moore. Steve, look, if Trump secures a new fair deal with China, does this turn into a major political win? And that's a big if.
not just a political win, but it would be a huge economic and financial win for the country as well. Trump will win. Yeah. There's no way that China can retaliate in a way that doesn't do much more damage to their own economy than to ours. Look, if you look at the financial markets, the net worth of American companies is multiple times higher than all the Chinese companies. So we have incredible leverage. They can't possibly get out of their economic, they're in a bit of a mini depression themselves. Nobody in the media seems to be following that, but their stock market has crashed. Their economy is way down even further than ours has. So I think when you talk about pain threshold, there is no way that a tit-for-tat strategy works for China. What has to happen next, if Trump is going to win, and he will win, is to get these side deals cut as quickly as possible with Europe, with Canada, with Japan, with Korea, and you basically make China the man outside that's still standing at the table. I think that strategy works. Right. I think China is going to lose if they try to retaliate. It just doesn't work for them.
All right, next one for you. Let's look the other way. The White House working with Europe to reach trade deals. Trump recently spoke to the UK Prime Minister on the phone. Vice President Vance went to Rome to meet with Italy's Prime Minister. This seems a lot more positive, would you agree?
I hope so, and I think it is. I mean, every indication out of the White House is that the phones are ringing off the hook, the switchboards are lit up with these foreign leaders calling, and especially the Europeans. I mean, this is a gut check moment for the Europeans. They're going to have to make a decision about whether they're going to decide with the United States or they're going to side with China. And this talk that, well, gee, maybe we'll cut a separate deal with China, I think is outrageous. What kind of an ally would do that? So it is an important moment. And by the way, Europe's economy isn't doing very well either. So they need to have access to America's incredible, the biggest consumer market in the world.
Oh, yeah. We have the upper hand. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Steve Moore, as always,
leverage.
Steve.
It's the art of the deal. Yeah.
Indeed it is. Steve, thank you very much.
So this deserves repeating. President Trump slamming Jay Powell again, writing in part on Truth Social today, quote, with these costs trending so nicely downward, just what I predicted they would do. There can almost be no inflation, but there can be a slowing of the economy unless Mr. Too Late, a major loser, lowers interest rates now. Of course, he was talking about Jay Powell. Joining us now is Art Laffer, former Reagan economist and author of The Trump Economic Miracle. Art, wonderful to see you again. So I've got a question. It's a four-part question, and you can only answer one answer of the four different choices you have. What are investors most concerned of right now? The trade war, recession, tax increases, or the Fed? You can only choose one. What are they most interested in worrying about?
Trade war, I think, is the one they're most interested in, David. Yeah. I think if he were able to bring in some big deals where tariffs were lowered to zero, I think this would be over. I think it's really important that he gets some of the trade deals done, especially Japan, especially Mexico, especially Canada, these ones then. And then, by the way, it's really important that he goes to China as well and does something there. At some stage, we've got to deal with China and make it a mutually beneficial trade pattern with China. If he does that, this stock market goes up 20,000 points.
Wow.
That's my take.
Well,
if we get really free trade there, it'll be a boom.
But China is really playing hardball. I mean, obviously, President Trump is the one who started throwing the balls, but this one is really tough.
Yes.
And now they're saying that, if other countries make a deal with us, they're going to be cut out of China for good, et cetera. I'm just wondering who in their right mind would give up the United States for trading with China?
No one would, but that's not the way you want to handle China, to be honest, David. Yeah. China's going to be here 100 years from now, so are we. It's much better that century be one of peace and mutual business dealings rather than war. It really is much better. Now, we can't allow them to steal property rights. We can't allow them to do other things as well that is incorrect and not good for them to do. But that all can be handled with negotiation. Donald Trump can do that, and once he does that, it is game on. You're going to see the biggest boom of all time. Obviously, we need to get the tax bill passed. We need to do that. We also need to do Powell, the Fed. I mean, Powell's got to go, and Donald Trump is completely correct. My, of course, person for it is Kevin Warsh. I think he would be just terrific.
Yeah,
but what we need to do is follow on a price rule. A price rule will bring down interest rates dramatically. Yeah. Once you get that inflation rate down, President Trump is correct. Inflation coming down should lead to lower interest rates. That's very, very true. And if we had a price rule, I think we could get this place to the moon. And he needs to do that fairly soon. We don't have a lot of time to waste.
Well, let's talk about taxes, because we have this strange emergence of, for lack of a better term, rhinos among the Republican Party who are saying that tax increases is the best way to deal with everything right now. And even some sensible folks in the Republican Party are beginning to get a little wiggly there. And I want to play a soundbite from Jason Smith, who's the head of the Tax Writing Committee, the House Ways and Means, and get your reaction. Roll tape.
Congressman, do you support a hike, like a millionaire's tax? Do you support raising the corporate tax rate?
What I'll say right now is that we're looking at everything in the tax code, and we're going to provide a tax code that creates growth. So the corporate tax rate, there's been zero discussions about being raised. What has been discussed by news media, not within Congress, but by news media, is that they might increase the top tax rate. What I've said all along is that we're looking at every tax provision, every single tax provision.
I honestly, I think that was the wrong answer. I think the right answer would be, no, we're not going to raise the marginal tax rate because that kills growth. People won't work that little extra mile just in order to pay more money to the government in taxes, right?
Well, you're completely correct. I thought Jason was very cautious and very careful on what he said, but he said it's only discussed in the media. No one on the committee and no one in Congress is talking about raising the highest rates. He really said that. And he said no one is talking about raising the corporate rate either. So those two things, I believe him totally. And he's a pretty good guy, David. He just is very cautious and doesn't want to spill the beans and get ahead of himself. But I think he agrees with you 100%. And by the way, if the Republicans raise the corporate rate, or if they raise the highest rate, kiss the midterm elections goodbye.
Absolutely.
Because I'll campaign against every single one of them. I mean, I'll go against every one of them. I'd much rather have the cheats in the other party rather than my own party. And frankly, raising the rates is the wrong thing to do.
Well, and we've seen it. I mean, you don't have to go any further than read my lips. George H. Bush, I mean, he said that I'm not going to raise taxes. He did. And of course, he didn't last. Finally, just on the issue of trade generally, I mean, we did make deals with China before. Donald Trump did. Which were violated. It violated 6 ways to Sunday. So you say if we can make a deal with China, it's possible. We've done it before. Yeah, we've done it before, but they violated those deals. That's really the problem. How do you really tell them with sincerity that we're not going to make another phony deal for you? We're only going for a deal that'll stick.
Trump can do that very easily. He knows how to deal with Xi, and I'm not a negotiator. I don't know how to deal with him. But it's Xi that is the problem on this. Yeah. And they need to live by the world rules. And no one wants a war. And Trump has all sorts of other things on his table.
Yes, he does.
He needs to get peace, and he needs to get economic growth, and he needs that stock market up 20,000 points. And that has to be done really quickly. And that he can do. I could tell him the exact economic plan that he could do to get that up there. And he can negotiate Ukraine, he can negotiate the Middle East, and he can negotiate with China, and especially vis-a-vis Taiwan. And I think Trump has it in him to do it, and I think he can do it, and he will do it.
Well, I applaud your optimism, and 90% of the time that optimism pays off. It really does. Art Laffer, wonderful to see you, my friend. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Coming up,
to see you, sir.
Good to see you.
Beijing now threatening retaliation against any country that sides with the U.S. in a trade war, warning the world could slide back into the law of the jungle. Markets selling off once again on trade worries. The Dow is down, S&P down almost 3%, and NASDAQ down over 3%. Still, the White House wheeling and dealing. South Korea's top trade negotiator lands in D.C. this week. Norway's prime minister meets with President Trump on Thursday, and a deal with Japan could be imminent.
It looks like we're north of 15 now of legitimate, serious offers on the table. If you start seeing schedules, world leader visits, my guess is it's a good sign, really, really good sign that we're close to the finish.
Okay, so we're talking some finish lines here. Charles. Or Kevin Hassett is anyway.
Yeah, at least Kevin Hassett.
What do you think about that?
I think the timing is pretty good. Over the weekend, Apollo put out this pretty intriguing work that showed that historically the average trade deal takes 18 months to put together and another 45 months to implement. Wow. So 90 days against that would be amazing, absolutely amazing. Now we know, of course, that's part of it would have been, I think this is one of the reasons the administration came so hard to begin with, right? A lot of that's the back and forth. We meet, you meet, let's meet there, let's meet here. Cutting all of that out, creating a greater sense of urgency, and maybe on our end also being able to do things like regulatory reform and things like that to expedite those things. But it does give you it does really put into perspective just how big of an undertaking this is. And it's the sooner we get a big deal like a Japan, for instance, I think the better it will be. And because you don't necessarily need a whole lot immediately per se, as long as you get a big one that sets the precedents, right? That becomes a template for all of the rest, so to speak. And Japan being wooed a little bit by China, of course, they have a really adversarial relationship otherwise. And even their top diplomat saying, hey, listen, we're not going to bow to everything America wants, which acknowledges we will bow to something that America wants. That's right. And so if we can get someone in that region of the world, particularly the second largest economy in that region of the world, it would be huge, and it would really be a big sigh of relief, I think.
So, Taylor, you look at markets. You got Kevin Hassett saying, man, I think we're getting really close to the finish line. You got Japan pushing back a little bit, but I think what they're saying is we're going to give a lot as well. But the markets don't seem to want any more happy talk about finish lines being near. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, Charles brought up an interesting point. I was sort of debating this over the weekend. That's what we do on our Saturday nights when you're having fun.
Wow, rip-roaring Saturday, debating tariffs.
Do we want the White House, let's say, for example, and I'm making this up, 10 people have lined up and they're negotiating trade deals. Do you want the White House to wait and then just a month from now or 2 months from now come out and say, these are the 10 that we have? Or do you want the dribble? One done, here's another, here's a third, here's a fourth. And I think the market actually, and Charles may disagree with me, may actually want to wait and just get the biggie. Let's get like the
wait
first
for another
10 out there.
2 weeks of today's type sessions?
No. Yeah, no, I mean, and I hear you. But like, if I get one dribble and it's a tiny guy.
Oh, it can't be a tiny guy. We can't get New Guinea, right? I mean, like, we got to start a little big, right?
Well, and I'm wondering, my worry is the market's waiting on the biggie from China. And that's going to take longer. So the market, I think, needs to get through a few biggies, but give me like the top 10 and let's go. But I think, I wonder if at the end of the day, we need China eventually, because China, there was reports today, they've returned, I believe, 2 Boeing 737 MAX jets. That's the top seller for Boeing. And reportedly, the government has told their airlines stop accepting delivery after the big tariffs. So again, not that would force anyone's hand. That's 2 Boeing jets. No one cares in the scheme of the world. But again, if China's the biggie, do we need to start to get closer to some of those?
All right, so Jackie, we're talking biggies. We're talking dribbles.
I couldn't help piping in on the dribble. I want a dribble. I want something.
You want a dribble?
Something.
That starts now, though. You want a quick dribble.
To Charles's point, I don't want it to be New Guinea. I want it to be Japan. I want it to be the EU. I want it to be something substantial. And then those smaller ones can come out later. But if you make me wait, Taylor, for 10 countries to put a deal together on the table or this market, I think you're going to have a little bit more pain on your hands, and nobody wants that. So I think the administration is sensitive to thinking about it that way. They might wait for the big one, not China, but whatever is second best to them to kind of give the market before they come out with a smaller one. When I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how China retaliated.
On your Saturday night?
On my Saturday night. They're doing things like you're mentioning Boeing. They're going to rely more on Airbus. They're not rolling over. But China's got a lot of problems. It's not that easy for China. And they've got a difficult situation on their hands. Consider their demographics. They've got this aging population, not enough young people. The young people are going to be supporting the old people by 2030. We're talking about in 5 years from now. That was because they instituted the one-child policy, which when I was there was in place. And it just was really wild when you thought about it. They've still got local government debt. They've got a real estate problem still. None of these problems fix themselves over the course of COVID. They are dependent on exports. That's their economy. And so they can try to box out the U.S., but if the other countries don't play ball, they're going to have a hard time.
You can't replace the U.S. market.
Right. And then even with technology, we're nipping at their heels. I don't feel like they own that. And they have geopolitical tensions too with their neighbors, right? And so who are their biggest friends? Russia and Iran? Doesn't put you in a great position.
Dagan.
I worry about the auto tariffs that have already gone into place, and particularly President Trump has floated the idea of a temporary reprieve for auto parts, but there's still so much uncertainty, and this is not part of the country-to-country negotiations. This is a giant of an industry, and in the United States, not just U.S. auto manufacturers, but some of our greatest industry and manufacturing in the United States is from foreign automakers, and they too will be hurt by these 25% tariffs. The import tariff has already been put into place. That was at the beginning of April. The auto part tariff goes into place in early May. And this is just anecdotal, but talking to my 88-year-old father on the phone, he said, yeah, see, Volvo is laying off people in Dublin, Virginia. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, yeah, it's there's a facility in Dublin, Virginia, and there's one in Maryland. They're starting to lay people off. And also, it also involves a Mack truck site outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania. Now, you can say this is only 800 workers at 3 facilities over the next several months because of the tariff issue, but this is a lot more to come. And I think that particularly with the 25% tariff on imports, that you will see whole showrooms shut down across the United States in a matter of months once supply is gone. And that's one of the reasons that the market keeps selling off, because it's not just one trade deal. Because and a lot of people I talk to do not see a trade deal happening with China. And they're beginning to factor that in.
China, to me, seems like a huge nut to crack.
Right.
I really do. If that's the good news the market's looking for, I think it's going to be a very bumpy ride.
And I wanted to get back to how we started this off with the hardball that China's playing. This is not necessarily new, right? Wolf warrior diplomacy started under Xi Jinping, right? And it's the confrontational form of public diplomacy, and it's something that he's emphasized in. It's really been drastic in the past, and this is part and parcel of that. You know, the whole Belt and Road thing was almost like one of these fairy tales, like to bring these countries in, right? Give them these loans, which of course end up being crazy, right? They own the ports in Sri Lanka. They technically own a few countries, smaller little island countries, if they wanted to cash in on them. And then when that wasn't working, they really stepped up this wolf warrior diplomacy. So they've been playing really hardball with their neighbors for a long time, and so that part is not a surprise. It might actually speak to a certain desperation on their part, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you know, when the Belt and Road Initiative was a long-term play by then, and I think it was done for moments like this when they probably anticipated at some point the U.S. was going to say we want to build a ring around China. And China knew what they were doing. The roads, the bridges, the investments were the chip. That's what you play when the U.S. plays this hand now, and that's what they're doing.
No, Anto, how does China get rare earth the dominance, right? I mean, they get access to these things in different countries, and then they bring it back to China and process it there. Yeah. They've created they've created on the manufacturing side something that's going to be really tough to dismantle or compete against.
Yeah.
I just want to note, though, that we were told we would get a notice on the semiconductor tariffs. Remember, don't call it an exemption, don't call it an exclusion. Well, on the smartphones and the technology imports coming in on tariffs, not 20% the fentanyl tariff, but the reciprocal tariff in China and the 10% coming in from other countries. Well, that's still in place, and we were told it's going to be a week that we get the replacement tariff on semiconductors under national security. Didn't get that. Meanwhile, the small businesses, medium-sized businesses who depend on China imports, like for Christmas, they're getting screwed, and nobody talks about them, not enough.
We'll see if we get that news this week.
Starting probably in next month, May, my time allocation to DOGE will drop significantly. I'll have to continue doing it for, I think, probably the remainder of the president's term, just to make sure that the waste and fraud that we stop does not come roaring back. But starting next month, I'll be allocating far more of my time to Tesla. And now that the major work of establishing the Department of Government Efficiency is done.
Elon Musk shifting gears, saying that it is time to take a step back from DOGE and focus more on Tesla, admitting that, quote, political sentiment may be hurting the company. Tesla stock still down about 40% since the beginning of the year. That's including today's rally. And frankly, he's got his work cut out for him. Tesla reported a 71% drop in net income in the first quarter year over year. Automotive revenue slid to less than $14 billion in the first quarter, a 20% decline year over year. So, Heather, curious your thoughts on Tesla. To me, you know, we were talking about this all week. Analysts wanted to see if Elon Musk would pivot back to doing, instead of 110% DOGE, a little bit less and a little bit more on Tesla. Is that sort of what you wanted and what you got out of it?
Yeah, I think if you're a Tesla investor, you really did want to hear that. And to Elon Musk's point, he says we have been somewhat insulated from these tariffs in terms of the cars we sell in the U.S. are made in the U.S. manufactured plants. But at the same time, he's distanced himself from the issue because he does know the impact on the auto sector as a whole. It's evident here. But I think it's more than just his cars. I think it's his time, obviously, has been taken away from the genius he's put into Tesla and SpaceX. And it's a big initiative that he's taken on as part of DOGE to rein in wasteful government spending and abuse. But at the end of the day, he's had to take a step back. His investors have demanded, hey, we need you over here. Without you, these companies may fail. And we support what you're doing, but you've got to come back to us. And it's also a shame. This is also because of the liberal media and the pressure they put, like, for people to go out and destroy private property, keying his cars, and basically threatened future Tesla owners from buying those cars. That's a shame.
Jackie, the good news that I got out of this is this was a quote. Tesla is not immune to the sort of macro demand for cars. So, you know, when there's economic uncertainty, generally people want to pause on buying, like doing a major capital purchase like a car. But absent macro issues, we don't see a reduction in demand. That actually flies in the face of some of the comments that we've gotten about people burning the Tesla, selling the Teslas, never going there. So that actually seemed to me more positive than I thought.
Yeah, I mean, the people who have them do love them. And, you know, I think we were talking about yesterday this notion that I was saying maybe he shouldn't make the DOGE back away announcement on the call, but the way he framed it was also not just to reassure investors, but also the employees. We've talked about morale at the company through this kind of tumultuous time. And so I guess it was appropriate, and they wanted to know that he's coming back and he's going to be advising. It's nice to hear that demand isn't down. The stock is definitely up on all this news. But, you know, the future of Tesla is still how should I say it? In question, uncertain. You know, I want to hear more about what they're working on, what the next levels and next phases are, and some of that innovation, because that's what Elon Musk is so, you know, amazing at and so brilliant about. And if I can just pivot to DOGE for 1 second, because that is what, you know, sucked a bit of his time away. The $160 billion isn't what he promised. It's not. I concede that. But at the same time, it's not chump change. $160 billion a year. If we could save that, if they can get that net figure a little higher, if we can get that into the bill, I think they made tremendous progress here. And even just having the conversation, because everybody got so accustomed to being okay with all the waste and fraud, like, well, that's just part of the system and that's what happens. It doesn't have to. So I think he did a really great job with that. I'm all on board for Elon.
You know, Brian, to talk about some of the other ambitions, they reconfirmed they're going to get that robo-taxi to try to compete with Waymo in Austin in June.
Okay.
When it comes to Optimus, the humanoid robot, it was interesting, though. He said, we're having a magnet issue, so some of the magnets that go in...
I hate those issues. Magnet issues are the worst issues.
The problem is the ingredients, components in the magnet come from China.
Oh.
And so he said, we're like trying to make sure China knows that we're not using them for military use. We're just using them for a robot. But there is the rub where there are complications when it comes to tariffs. He called out India. India has an effective 100% tariff on cars and Teslas. And so he's trying to open up that market. That would be a huge middle-class market. So there are some issues on multiple fronts.
Which is why I think they said we're not going to revisit our guidance for 2025 until the end of next quarter. So it's not until July that they're actually going to talk about 2025, which kind of goes back to my point yesterday that I just don't think 2025 is going to be much but a throwaway year for them. Elon Musk is coming back. He's got two issues, and one we've talked about. He's going to spend more time with Tesla, okay? Yeah. And I think that matters a lot because he's one of the most creative people on earth, and his time with Tesla is going to matter in terms of what they do with these products. His bigger issue is his profile, and that's not a time issue. That is, who is Elon Musk? 10 years ago, when my students were doing every other presentation in my class in college was on Elon Musk because everybody was in love with him. It didn't matter where you were coming from. He was Tony Stark. He was the great character. That's changed a little bit now. And so even if he spends more time with Tesla, he still has to deal with the fact that there's a huge chunk of his major buying population that no longer feels that way about him like they did 5 or 10 years ago. I don't know how he's going to solve that. I think that he can. Part of it's going to be bringing in buyers who typically didn't affiliate with him. And part of it is going to be making these morons who deface dealerships and key cars, isolating them and making the world understand without any question they are morons. You should not want to follow what they're doing. And buying a Tesla is not a social justice move, is not anti-social justice. Buying a Tesla is a perfectly good thing to do. You can feel great about it wherever you are in the political spectrum. That's not an easy lift, but I think he's got to actually do that. So his time's got to translate into that.
Just for the record, I had to Google Tony Stark.
I was going to say, who is that?
Iron Man.
Iron Man. No. Okay, Dagan, pivot, save us from ourselves.
Tesla's not just in the automobile business, it's also in the energy generation and storage business. And to quote Ross Gerber, a Tesla investor, looks like energy storage saved some pretty dismal numbers from Tesla. This is a good thing, but it's an emerging problem for Tesla because this business will get hit much harder than the car business by the China tariffs. So revenue for it's called the Megapack and Powerwall battery systems business. It came in revenue, $2.373 billion. That is almost 20% of what the core auto business makes or brings in revenue, which is $14 billion. However, the auto business is kind of, although Tesla brings in some parts from China, as one example, for auto assembly here in the U.S., Tesla is the most American-made automobile company. The average total domestic content of a Tesla is 81%. However, with the energy and the Megapack and Powerwall battery systems business, the growing trade war will be a problem. Even according to the chief financial officer, the tariffs will hit the car company on auto parts, but the energy storage business, it'll be much more severe. The impacts of tariffs on the energy business will be outsized since we source LFP battery cells from China, said the CFO. So what was a bright spot will dim in the coming months unless this gets solved. And I mean, what's going on in Washington? Not out in Nevada and Texas where the Teslas are made.
The only thing I'll end on is
Hard to bet against this man, though, right? Somewhere there's a will, there's a way. He's always somehow turned it around. So
you're not
that's
betting
the hope,
on Musk
least.
right now. You're betting on Trump and everything that's happening with trade.
Interrupt, but the New York Stock Exchange is holding a moment of silence for Pope Francis after his passing. Let's go to the New York Stock Exchange. All right, well, they had it, a moment of silence, a minute of silence for the passing of Pope Francis at the age of 88. Well, House Judiciary Chair Congressman Jim Jordan joins us now. Congressman, what do you make of the Supreme Court's decision?
Well, I think the Solicitor General said that the administration is going to look for some other statutory way to remove these individuals. We'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. I think it'll play out in a pretty expedited way. But the bottom line here is that, you know, there are people who came to this country illegally. There is some level of process that they're due, but it's not the same as we American citizens. We're entitled to due process under the Constitution. They're entitled to some level of process. The Justice Department says they're going through that, evaluating each and every one of these individuals.
Congressman, I just want to take a moment here. Sorry to interrupt, but the New York Stock Exchange is holding a moment of silence for Pope Francis after his passing. Let's go to the New York Stock Exchange. All right, well, they had it, a moment of silence, a minute of silence for the passing of Pope Francis at the age of 88. Congressman, sorry to interrupt, but let's get back to the Supreme Court's decision. What are the options for the administration?
Well, I think, again, they've asked to use other authority to deport migrants who are here illegally. We'll see how that plays out. We'll see how this case is argued in front of the court. I think it'll be a pretty quick decision that we get to. But the bottom line is the president ran on this issue. He told the American people what he was going to do. I think the Alien Enemies Act is entirely appropriate. It talks about predatory incursion. So many of these individuals are here are doing exactly that. So I think we just got to let this play out in court. But this administration is committed to doing what they told the American people they were going to do, what they were elected to do, and they've been carrying that out. Yeah. We'll continue to see how this plays out in our courts.
I want to get to this one as well, Congressman. I want you to listen to what Senator Van Hollen had to say in defense of his taxpayer-funded trip to visit that alleged MS-13 gang member, Abrego Garcia. Listen to this.
I want to be very clear. I'm not vouching for the man. I'm vouching for the man's rights, his constitutional rights to due process. And the proper place to litigate that is in the courts. My whole point here is if you deprive one man of his constitutional rights, you threaten the constitutional rights of everybody.
And Congressman, you know, why are Democrats so hung up on defending an illegal immigrant who the administration says is a known gang member? I don't get it.
Yeah, an illegal immigrant who's a member of this MS-13 gang who actually was in front of a judge, and a judge determined that those facts were accurate. Now, there's been a subsequent judge who said that, he may be in danger because he says there's another gang who wants to do him harm. I think it's interesting. He's not a member of MS-13, but there's another gang that wants to do him harm. You got to kind of wonder about all that. But there has been a level of process. Again, not the same level that we as American citizens get, but there has been a level of process, and that they do this, I think, for every single individual they're going through. They're evaluating, they're looking at this, they're seeing, was this person a member of a gang? Is he here illegally? If so, then they're gonna send this individual back. So Mr. Van Hollen or Senator Van Hollen can do what he wants, but I think the American people understand what's going on here, and they understand the whole context. 10 million people allowed in the previous administration just to come into this country. They understand that as well.
Exactly. Congressman Jim Jordan, terrific stuff as always. Congressman, thank you very much.